Yuji's Heian lore is absolutely insane, from his ancient ties to Sukuna all the way back in the Heian Era, to the royal imperial bloodline that he has in his family and his ancestry, with him perhaps being a prince or maybe even being the general all the way back in the Heian Era that actually defeated Sukuna. And of course there's all the Kenjaku theories that relate to him as well, so trust me, there's a lot of Yuji to talk about this video, so if you're a Yuji fan, you're definitely going to want to stick around until the end. So hey, do you boys solid and leave a like, it does help out. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content, a ton of crazy theories like this one, spoiler videos on chapters, power scaling analysis, and only 10% of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you love JJK, trust me, you will not regret subscribing. Thank you. And of course, thanks to special members of the channel, That Guy Trait and Ever Aaron. Let's get into this Yuji video. So first, I'll actually start the video off with some classic theories that you may or may not have heard, and then later on in the video, I'll get into all the crazy Heian theories that pertain to him being a prince, perhaps the general that beat Sukuna, and all that crazy stuff. Okay, so the first theory I'm going to throw out there is a very basic theory that's actually been around in the fanbase for a very long time, I think many months, probably over a year now, where it goes that Yuji is actually a Sukuna finger, or he's made from a Sukuna finger. And now a lot of people are actually confused, and they think that right now Sukuna is at only, for some reason, 17, 18, or even 19 fingers. Now, although technically, yes, he's at 19 fingers, in terms of power, he's at 20 fingers right now. The Shinbutsu mummy that he actually ate a month before the Gojo fight, it does actually count as one other finger, so right now he's at 20 fingers worth of power, even though there's still one finger out there. Now, Sukuna himself theorizes or just guesses that maybe Gojo has it, and he actually kept it hidden so that the higher-ups couldn't execute Yuji, which would be a very smart maneuver from Gojo, and it really could be that this is just the case. However, what we have to remember is that this is just Sukuna theorizing and guessing. He is just as clueless as us. He made an educated guess, but it's just not factual. I mean, yeah, maybe it's possible that Gojo really was just hiding the finger, but I do believe that the one who actually hid the finger was Kenjaku, and this is a secret that he has kept hidden from everyone. No one other than him knows this. And the theory goes is that when he was actually pregnant with Yuji when he was in Kaoru Itadori's body, it's possible that somehow via the embryo or whatever experimentation he did while Yuji was in the womb, he actually fused the baby with the Sukuna finger, thus creating Yuji Itadori. So that would explain two things. So the first thing to explain is why, if he were a finger, why he never saw Sukuna in his innate domain his whole life. And it would be because the baby didn't eat the finger, the baby is actually fused or created from the finger. He is the finger, thus probably the soul of Sukuna, I guess, just isn't there anymore. And it would also explain why he's just such a great vessel for Sukuna, and a very great one. And the second thing that this would explain is why Yuji is just so physically gifted, because it's just really weird how way before he even had Jujutsu abilities and curse techniques, he's just physically a monster. It was actually said twice in the story that he physically, just without cursed energy, is on a completely different level compared to even pre-awakened Maki, where Megumi actually said that if he had gone all the Kyoto and Tokyo students and had them all fight against Yuji, but no one had cursed energy, so this includes Megumi, Todo, Panda, and Maki, of course. So if all of them fought Yuji, no one has cursed energy, Yuji would just definitely 100% come out on top. That's how strong he is physically. And that's beside the fact that the narrator just blatantly said Yuji's physical prowess and instincts just actually surpass Maki, and that's without cursed energy. And this does actually make sense with what we see in the series. I mean, he was breaking world records very casually in sports he's never even played before, and of course he was actually fighting against the strongest grade 1 of the series, at least one of the strongest you've ever seen, Higuru, without cursed energy. And yes, it's not like he was winning, he was actually getting completely destroyed, but at the very least he was surviving for a while. He was managing for a while out there, where even Higuruma praises him, because it's just such a weird thing. Why is Yuji so physically strong? He doesn't have a heavenly restriction, at least not the one that Maki and Toji have, because if you have that heavenly restriction, the takeaway of that binding vow is actually you lose the ability to use or maintain cursed energy. You just have it in general. And Yuji has cursed energy. He has no heavenly restriction, at least none that we're aware of. And it's something that's just never brought people as saying, yeah, this guy is a physical monster, but why? No one has ever explained why. This would explain it. Because his body is made from a finger, that's why he's physically so strong. And again, it would explain why he can just control Sukuna so well, or he was such a perfect vessel for him. Another theory is that Yuji is actually going to be the vessel for the merger. And let me read Ever Aaron's comment here. He says, I'm thinking at some point Kenjaku and Sukuna will have to betray each other, which makes sense. I'm sure both of them are thinking about betraying each other, or at least have contingencies if one betrays the other. They're both very smart characters. Do you think Kenjaku plans to take over Yuji's body to up the chances of beating Sukuna someday? He created Yuji to be a vessel for Sukuna alone, right? The answer to this is both yes and no. At least on the surface level, you'd think it's yes. And we actually have some more insight when Choso just straight up asks him, what are your plans for Yuji? I'm sure you have a more specific role for him compared to the death painting. Kenjaku responds, and I quote, actually he doesn't have a specific role. You could say being a vessel is his role, and that's already in place. Yuji Itadori is like a fire signaling the start. As long as he and Sukuna are alive, the chain of curses will never end. He is the eye of a storm of a new age. Now it's very interesting that the wording that's used, he doesn't say being a vessel of Sukuna is his role, he just says being a vessel is his role. And that just happens to be in place right now of Sukuna. And he doesn't say that Sukuna is the eye of the new storm, or that if only Sukuna is alive that the chain of curses will never end. He says Yuji as well. So with both of those wordings, especially the vessel wording where it's specifically being a vessel is his role, not Sukuna's vessel, I actually think Kenjaku's plans and goals with Yuji have actually changed. Remember, 1 entire month has passed from this conversation with Choso and where we are right now in the story. And since then, a lot has changed, mainly that Sukuna has a new vessel being Megami Fushiguro. What this means is that Yuji's role of being a vessel is no longer in place for Yuji, and he's just pretty much freed up for that. And on top of that, he's actually even more suited for that role now that he's soaked in Sukuna's cursed energy. He got more cursed energy from the death painting rooms, and he is like a cursed object too, specifically a Sukuna finger. If anyone is perfect to be a vessel for anything right now, it is Yuji. He is the perfect vessel, and that's why I actually believe he probably will be the vessel for the merger. Now, the zombified Tengen asks Kenjaku why adopt such courteous methods. If you want to end the culling game, why not simply remove this pure barrier? Kenjaku responds, because then the barriers for the ritual merger with you would disappear. And that's very interesting, the wording that he uses, ritual. With him using the word ritual, I do think that the host of this ritual or a key piece of this ritual will be having a vessel, because basically the way the merger actually works is that Tengen, using the barriers that he's made all across Japan, will fuse with all of the humans of Japan, though notely not the actual sorcerer, since if you even have a bit of cursed energy and you can control it, you can actually just outright reject the merger very easily. But as I was saying, Tengen will fuse with all of the regular humans in Japan and create the merger. But I think it's just too much to contain or even maintain if there was no vessel, or if there was nothing to house this merger creature. I think it just wouldn't be able to sustain itself and eventually just collapse. So if this ritual needs a vessel for the merger, I think Yuji is the perfect candidate. Soaked in Sukuna's energy, he's a cursed object, he's got a ton of cursed energy from the death paintings, and his physical body is insanely tough. And on top of all that, if the other theory is true where Yuji's actually going to place his soul inside of Megami's body, or I guess Sukuna's body now, and him and Megami are going to fight Sukuna from the inside to defeat Sukuna inside the innate domain, if Yuji switches out his soul, then his body is not going to have a soul and it's just going to be an empty husk. If Kenjaku comes in and snatches that body, with all the other reasons I just said before, and now include the fact that there's no soul, Kenjaku places the merger inside of Yuji so Yuji can contain it and be its vessel. Kenjaku would be able to control it as well, since there's no Yuji soul to fight back or resist. So I'm not saying Yuji's going to become evil as the merger. I actually think his soul would be inside of Megami, but it's just his body would be the vessel for it. Or hey, maybe Yuji's soul would actually be overridden by the merger, since the merger is such a monster. Who knows how it's going to go. Alright, and now to get into the juicy part of the video, Yuji's Heian ancestry, with him potentially being the general that defeated Sukuna, his connections to Sukuna, and his royal blood too. And hey, if you've been liking the video, be sure to subscribe for a ton more JJK content. Okay, so the first thing I gotta bring up is that Sukuna looks too similar to Yuji, his father, and his grandfather. It's just an eerily similarity that he has between the two, with not just the hair, they have the exact same hair and hair color, but it's the fact that they just look the same. The faces, the facial structure, you know, beside the deformed 2 eyes that Sukuna has on one part of his face, he just looks similar to them. Now, of course, GEGE has just come out and outright said that Sukuna has no wife, or he's had no children, so at the very least, Yuji's family bloodline is not directly from Sukuna. But what I think is actually happening is that Yuji would actually come from one of Sukuna's brothers, maybe his actual twin, he's an ancestor from that bloodline, or maybe a cousin or something along those lines. Since I actually do theorize that Sukuna is a disgraced prince or a disgraced royal, hence where his name, the Disgraced One, came from. And I talk about this a lot in my Sukuna Origins video, but I'll be going over some of it in this one too. And we also learned in the new chapter that Sukuna was an unwanted child as well, specifically a wretched child. Now, this could be for 2 reasons. Either 1, he was just born very deformed, so that's why his mother didn't want him, pretty sad stuff, or 2, it's just like Maki and Mai, he was a twin, which obviously makes sense since the actual Ryomen Sukuna in lore was a twin as well, specifically a conjoined twin. And we know in JJK that twins are a sign of bad omen, and because of this, there's actually a practice even now in the modern JJK day that usually you'll either get rid of one of the twins or both of the twins, because it's bad to have them. And Maki and Mai even existing and staying alive as twins, they were actually an exception. So it's possible that the baby Sukuna was left to die, or maybe when he grew up he was kicked out. And also something very important to know moving forward is that GEGE actually did say in the 38th Manga Award of Japan that he actually got Sukuna from the Nihon Shoki Chronicles, which is an old school storytelling book of Japan, where the main influence and ideas of Sukuna came mostly from that, and also a bit from another manga that existed, but mainly from the Nihon Shoki. So much so that if you read the Nihon Shoki, literally it perfectly describes the Ryomen Sukuna. I mean, 1-to-1, it's just where GEGE got Sukuna. And beside the fact that GEGE has just straight up said is where he got Sukuna from, in the opening of season 2, if you notice that there's actually a scene where someone's holding a candle and they're going over paintings or murals, those painting and murals are actually from the Nihon Shoki Chronicles of Japan. So even the opening is incorporating this book into the anime. Now, the reason it's important to bring this up is that in the Nihon Shoki, Sukuna is actually defeated by a specific general that was from the Imperial Court of Japan, the royal family. And this general's name was Takefurukuma no Mikoto, and I theorize that at least it's possible that Yuji may be either a reincarnation of an incarnation of this general. Now how it went in the Nihon Shoki is that this general just defeated Sukuna, putting an end to his tyranny and reign, and kicked him out of the Hida prefecture which he ruled over and where Sukuna actually was worshipped and got offerings from. Now the way I theorize it's gonna go, at least in the JJK lore, is that this general now, maybe it was just him alone and he was this powerful, or maybe, and very likely, he actually just had a bunch of lads of him, right? He got the squad, the boys, to jump Sukuna, some high tier, very powerful Heian Imperial Court soldiers, and altogether they jumped and defeated the human, very importantly, the human that eventually turned into Ryomen Sukuna, since Ryomen Sukuna is actually his title, and perhaps they're actually dispatched by this because Sukuna had killed his twin brother or someone in the royal family, or if you watch my theory video on Sukuna and his origins, I actually believe Sukuna was the one responsible for killing the emperor of the Heian Era, and it's possible that that emperor was also his father or someone he may be related to, but at the very least I think he killed the emperor, since in the Nihon Shoki the emperor was actually killed specifically by a vengeful spirit called Kami, which translates to God, and I do think that maybe the twist is going to be that this vengeful spirit may have been Sukuna, or maybe Sukuna did it after the general tried to kill him. Regardless, the way I think it went is that this general, and maybe if he had any soldiers, and defeated Sukuna, and just before they killed Sukuna, or perhaps they actually did kill Sukuna, just like how Toji killed Gojo, I think this was the moment Sukuna probably awakened and thus transcended beyond humanity itself and became kind of like this ascended human that we see now, where he's very similar to Tengen, and even Kenjaku commented that they look the exact same. So that's why I believe Sukuna isn't a curse or a human, even though he's been called both in the past, and I actually think he's an ascended human, which means he's a mixture of both. It's possible that he ascended during this fight or as he was defeated, and with his new powers he decimated Takafurukuma no Mikoto and his soldiers if he had any. And this would explain why it was said in the story that Sukuna's never lost or never tasted defeat, because even if they did defeat him, Sukuna transcends and becomes stronger, then proceeds to kill them all. Well, then there's no witnesses or survivors to tell anyone that Sukuna had tasted defeat. So that would explain why in history no one knows that he had lost. So the theory that I have is that it's possible that Takafurukuma no Mikoto, and I love that name, either A, Yuji is actually a reincarnation or an incarnation of him specifically, or B, Takafurukuma no Mikoto is actually Sukuna's twin, which is not said in the Nihon Shoki, and I'm just going completely on theories right now, and the twin was actually sent to bring him down, and Sukuna thus killed his twin, and Yuji is a reincarnation of both his twin and the general that defeated him, which would be so cool, and it would explain a lot. Or C, Yuji is just simply a blood relative of the Imperial Court that was also a part of Sukuna's ancestry, but he didn't come directly from Sukuna, he probably came from one of Sukuna's brothers or sisters or his cousins or something like that. But to go back to option A and B, where Yuji may be Takafurukuma no Mikoto, that would actually explain why Sukuna has such a disdain for Yuji. Because yes, Sukuna hates everyone in general because it's Sukuna, but in particular he has a very visceral hatred for Yuji that he has for no one else. To the point that GEGE actually says that two of Sukuna's favorite hobbies and pastimes is one, just eating people, and two, it's seeing Yuji suffer or making him suffer. Specifically Yuji, not just people. If Yuji happened to be the incarnation or reincarnation of this guy or of his twin that Sukuna really hated, that would explain why Sukuna hates Yuji so, and why he treats Yuji so differently from others. And it's not just the hatred part, he just speaks to him and treats him differently than he has with any other character we've seen in the series, even Gojo or Sukuna. They really have a very unique dynamic between the two. It would be really cool where Yuji and Sukuna's beef transcends 1,000 years, where even the person Yuji was before, even after death, they reincarnated, and this was probably via Kenjaku's doing, and I'll get into why soon, where over the 1,000 years, this grudge match, this rivalry is still going down in the modern day. That is just awesome. And as to why I think maybe this is the case, it's because Sukuna specifically comments that Yuji is from that time, implying that he's from the Heian Era. And then after he says that, he says Kenjaku does the creepiest thing, further implying that Kenjaku was at least related to bringing back Yuji from that time. It's actually due to a gross translation error on Viz's part that a lot of people think that Sukuna was just referring to a statue and not the Heian Era. So much so that I've actually confirmed with two people in the Japanese community that the people who actually read GEGE's own words in Japanese and all the Japanese fans have completely different theories with the English community. The part that I'm talking about is when Sukuna says that Yuji just looks like that Harima statue. In the actual Japanese, it doesn't say statue, it doesn't say it at all. Maybe the translator was thinking about the famous statue from Harima and added it themselves, because Yuji does look like the statue in the moment when he's crying. But there's two important things. First of all, Yuji is just making that face just at that moment. Even if it were the case that this is what Sukuna's referring to, there's absolutely no effect on the statement that he made early on in the fight when he says Yuji is from that time. And the second point is, it just doesn't say statue in the Japanese. It's a nice theory, it's a nice double meaning from GEGE, but the issue is that the translator, and keep in mind John Wherry has made countless, and I mean countless, translation errors all throughout JJK and other translators who have done JJK for Viz. So this is just the first of dozens and dozens, unfortunately, but he had just taken his own theory or just something that he had thought would maybe had been true and added it as fact in the Viz community. Is this what GEGE was referring to? It could be possible, and it could just be possible that maybe GEGE was going for a double meaning too. But is that that what GEGE himself wrote? Is that what it actually says? No. And the issue is that now a large, and I mean a very large chunk of the English community or the English fans of JJK now just truly believe and take it as fact as that, oh, Yuji isn't from the Heian Era, or oh, is all just referring to that one statue this whole time, even though it was never said anywhere. Again, it's a nice theory, but it's not what was said in the Japanese, and it's very unfortunate, but it's a mistranslation that only affects our community. And having spoken to a native Japanese reader, translator, and fan who's in that community, they are thinking completely differently from us in the English community, where they actually believe all of this actually ties to Yuji and his Heian origins. The point being, I think that Yuji just has to be related to the Heian Era somehow, whether he's a descendant from Yuji's twins bloodline, or maybe just someone else from that bloodline, and possibly if Sukuna and Yuji's ancestors were maybe royals or princes of the imperial court if they were part of that family, and that would explain why the Ryomen Sukuna in law is an enemy of the imperial family, you know, because they tried to kill him and he's disgraced from them and he got kicked out of there. Maybe Yuji is the reincarnation or incarnation of Takefurukuma no Mikoto, explaining why Sukuna hates him, and maybe Takefurukuma is actually Sukuna's twin, maybe. Or maybe Yuji really just is a finger. Whichever one it's gonna be, I just know the Yuji lore is gonna go crazy, and it's gonna have to do with Kenjaku and Sukuna for damn sure. But hey, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, it helps out a ton. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content just like this. Like I said in the beginning of the video, 90% of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, so if you want to see a ton of crazy theories like this one, spoiler videos on JJK chapters, analysis, power scaling, and just if you're a JJK fan, be sure to subscribe. Trust me, you will not regret it. And of course, thank you to all the members of the channel as well. It is much appreciated. That's all from me. Take care, guys, and have a nice day.